Select Board.
Ricky Calduit from Highgate.
And Lynn Calwood from Highgate. Jim Dewitt from Franklin.
Jerry.
Yay.
Chris Shepherd from the Highgate Board.
I'm Steve Scott, Highgate Elementary Board.
Ryan Young from the Highgate Board.
And now we'll start.
Go ahead, Terry.
Terry O'Shea, Swanton.
Emily Norris, Sheldon. Julia Callen, Sheldon.
Kira Bouchard, School Board Secretary.
Connie Buer, Highgate, but I'm not a board member.
Donna
Recently.
Collins, I
I'm an
serve,
Act 46 member, yeah.
oh, it's okay. I serve on the Swanton Board, but I'm not representing the Swanton Board. I represent the MVU Board.
Right.
Oh,
You're
And-
serving on MVU Board too, aren't you anymore?
Yeah, I'm on the
Yep.
MVU Board.
and Julie Regenball, Superintendent. Good to have you all here. So I'm just struggling because this is really Bob's meeting and I
Yeah.
apologize on his behalf. I know he's just,
You know, we could do, we could approve the minutes
Mhm.
from the last one,
And we could have public comments.
and then
that
we can have
we
public
could do.
comments.
Do we have minutes?
We-
Oh,
there was-
okay, I didn't print them out.
I
Here they
didn't-
are.
I
I
didn't,
don't
I
know.
didn't read them either.
I didn't print
I didn't know I had them.
Here you are, Connie.
Thank you.
They're attached to they're double-sided and so.
So you haven't had a chance to look at them.
We have two sets.
We have the,
Okay.
We have two sets.
I forget which the
There
one,
was a meeting held at Franklin.
July
So,
10th, right? Is that the one?
I
The
don't, I
July-
didn't make it that way.
I didn't make
We
it.
did the last, it was June 27th meeting, and then there was also an Act 46 meeting in
Public
Franklin
meeting.
with a public forum.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think we're only approving the minutes from the June meeting of the Act 46 committee, right? So I make a motion that we approve the, I'll take the minutes. I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the June meeting. Anybody second?
Awesome.
Terry motion, Emily second. Discussion? All in favor, aye?
All right,
Aye. All opposed, no? Okay, the minutes from the June meeting passed unanimously. Okay, so that takes care of some of that, and then should we, it has a review of the state board meeting, which I think Bob will wanna do, but then it asks for public comment. So, and I see there's a good 10 minutes for public comments, we could get started, and then Bob will probably have some, is that okay with you all? How do you wanna do this? Do we wanna like give everybody some time, or start, everybody gets a minute or something? Everybody gets a minute? How's that sound? And if you want, you can give your minute to somebody else. How's that?
I think maybe some of them are waiting to hear what we're going to say about the state
Right.
board meeting review and next steps, I'm just
Okay.
saying.
I know. I think
Okay.
that's
Is
why
that right?
it is
Did anybody
where
want
it
to say
is.
anything right off, though?
I'm good.
Didn't come prepared to comment, just to listen.
But, oh, just to. Okay, so,
Maybe, I
Right.
don't want to put you on the spot, Jay, but would you want to report out on the meeting this afternoon?
Yeah, we can. For those of you that weren't able to attend, we had a meeting with Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman. It was pretty well attended, Brett was with us, and we talked about a lot of things that were concerning us. We talked about the total lack of credibility that the acting Secretary of Education's report included several errors that she had made. For example, the 40-year window of the Attorney Franklin's ADM thing is ridiculous. And relocating the Sheldon to Franklin Northeast was actually a violation of Act 46 because they're required to be mindful of make a decision that causes geographic isolation and something, which is exactly what happened here. And we basically were able to make the case that the credibility of her report is extremely in question. What we came away from was Mr. Zuckerman alluded to a lot of the legislators that were with us. The same thing was that they were in the impression that there was an escape hatch or off route for Act 46 under the Section 9 proposal. But I think they were surprised to find out that wasn't happening. In addition, he was particularly troubled with the way we were treated in Newark. So
Was he there?
he was there, and his chief of staff, several legislators,
That's good.
of course, the press was there. So, talk is cheap, see what he's gonna do about it.
Jay, I was thinking, when they talked about errors, did they just talk about the error that they didn't even have our Franklin Northeast and Franklin Northwest, right?
Yeah, actually, that's funny, because that subject itself was what led up to the lieutenant governor agreeing to meet with us, because David and I had been having back and forth discussions over the internet and emails and so forth, and at one point I told him, I said that, you know, the credibility is so much in question that they couldn't even get our name straight. And he said to me back, he said, well, are you sure you just didn't read that fast, and, you know, it's you that made a mistake rather than the state board? I said, no, I said, obviously you haven't read the secretary's report. I said, I would recommend that you go read it and then get back to me. So he emails me back and he says, Jay, he said, I have to apologize. He says, I should practice what I preach. He says, so, anyway, I think that was at the point where he decided that he should probably come up here and have a word with us. So, I'm glad that he did. I don't know what he can do to help us, but one more voice is not gonna hurt. The other thing I want to mention is that the next meeting is this Wednesday at Montpelier, and we will be attending. There
The
will
State
be-
Board of Education, Jay?
Yep, this is the next regional meeting. We will be in attendance. Our good friend and colleague in this, Margaret McLean, has prepared a detailed analysis of the Secretary of State's report, and there will be a press conference during the lunch period. And I promised I wouldn't divulge anything about the report until after the press conference.
Secretary of State, did you say? Secretary?
Pardon me?
Did I hear Secretary of State report, or did you say?
Secretary of Ed.
You said Secretary of Ed.
Secretary of Ed.
What's the time?
The meeting starts at 9 o'clock.
Capitol Plaza,
Pardon me?
Capitol Plaza.
It'll be in the State House. It
Oh,
was
it's in the
scheduled
State
for
House.
room 11, but I think they changed the room because there may be a larger crowd than the
And we need room 10.
room 11 is not very good.
And that's this Wednesday.
They always tried that much, having a small room.
There were,
Did they try it?
there were 30-plus people there today.
Wow.
Yeah. Well represented, folks from Montgomery, Highgate, Franklin, of course, and Sheldon.
Wow.
We had a good.
Montgomery came
And
too.
a number of legislators.
We had selectmen here, there, several legislators here.
That's interesting. So Montgomery was there, but Berkshire wasn't, or? Bakersfield, Berkshire, and Montgomery. Are they the ones that are supposedly together right now? Bakersfield?
Montgomery's
Bakersfield
not.
and Berkshire.
What's
Just
that?
Bakersfield.
Bakersfield and Berkshire are up.
Well, they've merged.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
have merged.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
They're functioning right now, so.
Yeah.
They've approved their merger,
But they haven't merged,
but
right?
it's
Not
not,
yet.
it's not, it's not complete yet.
That's what I thought. And Montgomery, oh, right, because it said in the report that Montgomery had said no, but they want them in there, yeah, okay. So, I'm just thinking in terms of time, the best
Mhm.
use of everybody's time, maybe we should do a review of the state board meeting. Bob was gonna do that, but maybe other
Okay.
people that were there could comment on it or talk about it? Or did you, Julie, you were there?
I certainly did. I've commented on at the various board meetings. Had a really good, I mean, you know, half of you were there. We had a really good turnout from Franklin, some folks from Highgate. Montgomery had a lot of folks there, many of the other communities, but by far, the Franklin Highgate contingent is the biggest. And they were very clearly not expecting, even though I received a call from Bob Stafford at the Agency of Ed, who was helping to set up the room, how many people, and I was joking at a board meeting, you know, you may need to bring your own chairs. They did know that there would be many people, but I do think that they were surprised at how many actually came. Once I think that volunteer in the community set up a sound system, that was much better. It was difficult for people to hear the comments, and they certainly started with folks who had agreed to merge and having conversations to perhaps appease people who didn't want to merge, that it wasn't so scary, and that seemed to be the message. Certainly Maple Run and the other district that was the host district in Newark. But I think, many public comments made the point that that's fine. They chose to do that. We're not choosing to. I do think that it was a tough spot to be in, being number one right off the bat to give comment. They were pushing back with some questions that certainly was saying, really the tone of the questions throughout the morning seemed to be, prove it, and they did talk a lot about people being in the same room together. So they definitely seem to have, those that spoke, seem to have a picture in their head that didn't always match what the message from the community was. And I don't know if anybody else would disagree with that. I thought everyone who spoke from the heart, and did well and respected the time and gave other people their piece. I thought it was a good expression of community support for their schools.
We didn't mention Sheldon, but Sheldon was also.
Yes, now you folks had a separate time.
We did.
And I'd let you speak to that.
Yeah, we had a separate time. We sat up as a unified board and just spoke our piece, the same pieces that we spoke at this meeting towards the end of June. We had to talk about why the merger didn't make sense for us and give data to highlight that. They heard us, but they heard us. It's no, I have no real feeling of what impact that had, if any. So I think we're kind of waiting to hear what difference that potentially made.
Just a couple of things that I'd like to add about the meeting. Absolutely correct, and I think Bob did a wonderful job of stating his case. A couple of things you should be aware of, though, if you haven't seen the tape. First of all, on the sound system, the local guy that set it up was John Betts. And he actually went outside after Mr. Stafford asked him to be quiet, because he only made a couple of comments that he couldn't be heard, so we needed a sound system. So he did go outside to cool down a little bit, and grumbling, he said, "Can't believe the school doesn't have a sound system." Someone overheard that comment and said, "You should speak to that person over there." So he went over and spoke to that person. He said, "Well, make up my mind. They just had me take that out yesterday." Interesting. But the other thing you need to know, and this is on the tape, so I'm not spreading rumors. Towards the end of the tape, John Connor made a comment, made a comment that I wish the people from Franklin County were here now, because I'd like them to know they should understand that our job is simply to push the wheelbarrow into the barn. And then they go on to state, he and another gentleman on the SBE state, well, they keep talking about voting. They took these votes. Don't they realize that doesn't mean anything? They can vote all they want. It doesn't mean anything. Vermont is not a home rule state, so it doesn't make a difference if you vote or not. But Act 46 required a vote, if you recall. So it seems that if you vote yes, that's the law. If you vote no, that's just town sentiment. But watch the end of the tape if you haven't had a chance to see that yet, because you'll see just how arrogant those individuals were.
Where do we find that tape?
I think you can find
The easiest way to find it is just do a search SBE Newark YouTube. That's it.
It sometimes plays on Channel
I just want to
15.
point out though that
It's about 5.5 hours long, so you may want to.
Okay.
I have to really take
Go
a hat
towards
off to
the
you
end.
because
You
you
can
really
fast
got
forward.
Mr. Mathis
Yeah.
good.
I did.
Yes, you did.
You really got him good. When he made.
Julie or Emily?
When he made the comment about, well, that's what we're here for, if you remember.
It's a whole blur.
Yeah, you got.
Well, you did a really good
I
job.
heard that.
I do remember
You
too.
did well.
He
That's
had
the
said
first time
something,
I've seen Bill Mathis speechless.
was this, he had said something to the effect of why not?
Yeah.
And you said,
Oh.
why? Basically, that was the exchange.
That
And
Like,
he asked if there was
That
give
was
a
fun.
good reason.
yes,
To
yeah.
merge, and I'm like,
That was a highlight, that was a highlight of the meeting.
Oh, I think,
That's the beginning of the day, huh?
It's also important to note that more than half of those people on that board are from backgrounds in independent or private schools, not public schools.
On the school bill,
Yeah.
of the state?
And that's happened under the current governor, because when I was there, that was not true.
Yep.
yeah.
You know, there's another theory floating around too, is that, I don't know if you've heard the rumors, but it's stated that the governor is interested in seeing every school with less than 150 students closed. I think that, you know, I don't wanna, I can't verify this, but I suspect that if you look at the teachers' retirement program, in 2008, it was just under $400 million in debt, unfunded obligation. And by 2017, that debt grew to $1.5 billion for the B. So I think that the state has a serious problem with the teacher retirement program. It's so bad that it's at $1.5 billion, it's enough to affect the state bond rating. So I think that they're really having a hard time struggling, and I think their hope is that if they stick to the Act 46 mantra, that there's a possibility that they might be able to get rid of teachers before they reach retirement age. It's a devious concept, but I wouldn't put it past them.
John Carroll should have been smart enough not to make that comment, because that's Francis Horrigan's comment.
That's correct.
That's
That's correct, and I'm told that.
It was
towards
told
the end-
better by Francis, though.
Toward the end of the meeting, he said, I never should have made that comment.
Yeah.
And he is correct, he should not have made that comment. But he did. But you were right. That's where it came from.
Wow.
Our two state senators were there.
Yeah, the Messenger did a nice piece on it. Where they
The
covered-
Courier did too.
Yes.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
it
the
did.
Courier did, and Greg
Yeah.
said he had to scramble to get there in time and get back to meet the
You
deadline.
can't get there from here,
Greg was
Oh.
scrambling.
You can get there.
Oh,
Yeah.
my word.
but it was a pretty drive.
Yeah,
So to speak.
he was scrambling to get the story, you know,
Yep.
in.
How did the North
Timely.
Country presentation go? Because North Country, John Castle, you know John very well.
Yeah.
They also are on the agenda, right?
Who was?
I don't think
North
they
Country.
went, I think they
North
pulled
Country.
out.
They weren't there.
They did not,
John
Charleston?
was there.
Brighton.
Charleston, yes,
Oh,
those two
Charleston.
schools, Charleston,
Brighton and Charleston.
Yeah.
just those two presented. No, they weren't, Montgomery, I thought, did a very good job of just sort of
Yes.
calling out
They did an
particular
outstanding
weaknesses in the
job.
report.
Yeah.
Um,
Mary was good.
Yep,
She did a good job at today's meeting as well.
good.
Who does that? What's her name?
Mary Niles,
Very nice.
she's the Montgomery chair.
Nice. So,
Do we want to talk about the Alberg meeting?
yeah, it seems like maybe, like you said, Connie, it seems like when we get to next steps is when we're gonna really have to have public input and talk about that. But the next item, should we talk about the Alberg meeting?
Mhm.
Let's talk about the Alberg meeting.
I can start.
That'd be great.
So, oh gosh, how many weeks ago now? It was the week before our July 18th meeting. I'm gonna get my mics confused. Mike Savage,
Yes.
the board chair in Alberg, called me up out of the blue. I sort of had the heads up from his principal that he might be calling me. But just saying, boy, we in Alberg do not like our supervisory union. We're trying to petition the state to leave the supervisory union. We know that Sheldon is a K-8 choice school. We're a K-8 choice school. Could we even have a conversation about the schools possibly merging? So, you know, and I knew Julia was preparing testimony to say, you know, there could be other alternatives. Even at our last Franklin Northwest board meeting, my first one, there was conversation from someone on the board, well, you know they're going to give us Alberg anyway, why don't we just have a side-by-side or something? There was a comment. So I reached out to Julia and Terry as Franklin Northwest. Bob said, I think this would be more Terry than I. And we scheduled a meeting just to have a conversation and see what their thoughts were and what Sheldon's thoughts were. We had that meeting last Wednesday before the Swanton board meeting. There was just Julia and me and Terry and two board chairs, members from Alberg, and their acting superintendent. So that was the group, and we heard their ideas. I was surprised to hear that they had a vote to form, I think they called it a 3-by-1, I'm not sure, because they have the merged district of Isle Lamont, Grand Isle, and North Hero. And I believe their voters approved to do that, and now they're trying to see if they can back out. That's my understanding. And Terry and Julia were there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so they, like you said, they petitioned the state to be removed. And if I remember correctly, they had had a no confidence vote for their superintendent
Yes.
last year. And so I guess it sounded like this has been ongoing for a year, like these issues for Albert. And so they petitioned the state to be removed from that supervisory union. And so the state offered to hear their testimony in the context of the Act 46 conversations. So they said that they would put them on the agenda for either Wednesday or the last meeting in September. So I think they thought they'd be on September's.
They had not yet had an agenda or seen themselves on it, so my assumption is that they're not on this week's agenda, because we knew where we were on the agenda more than a week ahead of time.
So their conversations with the state, it had come up a couple times. The state, people at the state had asked them where they would like to go, you know, if they could choose. They suggested Franklin Northwest, which is sort of what led to this conversation. So for Sheldon, I think we've identified our priorities are to maintain our school choice and to stay in Franklin Northwest. And if we need to explore, if there are other avenues to meet that, it's worth exploring for us. And so that's sort of what this was preliminarily for us. I think that we need to look at numbers and see what that structure would look like, first of all, and then bring that to the Franklin Northwest board.
Yes, I mean, as far as the population of the two communities, they're very similar, but the spending per pupil and the tax rates are very different. And again, you actually asked a very good question of Mike and said, how do you feel about joining another supervisory union? We're having concern about all that that would mean. Have you really considered all of what it would mean? And they seem to be they're just at that fed up stage, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be a good decision for either strategically for moving forward with the state board or for the two communities.
Actually, Julie, remember what he said, that they had talked about the curriculum that we offer here in Franklin Northwest, and that it was more advanced
Yes.
than what they were having over there.
Well, they've struggled to keep principals. They've had a lot of change in leadership.
I guess my
Right.
only, I'm not criticizing
Oh,
theirs,
no.
I'm saying that they saw it as a bonus.
They saw it as a bonus for them, absolutely. That was very clear.
So.
And that was the whole conversation. There was
Well, and I
no,
think it's important to realize
next
that it
step.
affects Sheldon,
yeah.
and it does affect the supervisory union, but it affects tax rates and budgets and things like that overall, but tax rates more Sheldon and
Yes.
operating. It does impact costs for the Franklin Northwest Supervisory Union, but it doesn't impact district of Franklin, Highgate, or Swan in terms of what happens to them.
So it would be a merger between the two schools that have similar structures.
Yes.
And then a side-by-side with the three that have similar structures.
So it is important for us to think about it in terms of Sheldon.
Yes.
And also in the bigger picture of the Franklin Northwest Supervisory Union, what it could mean in terms of cost.
For that, so if Sheldon and Albert were to merge, the only way that would work to stay within Franklin Northwest would that require the merger of the other 3 schools.
Right. So there'd be 2 boards, the Sheldon Albert Board and the merged board of Swanton, Highgate, and Franklin.
And having
And
the
then it's
agency of
the board still.
education,
And the-
the
and
state
the
board
SU.
vote for Highgate, Franklin, and Swanton to join them to form a pre-K 12.
What's that?
So the agency of education has recommended that the 3 elementary schools merge with MVU to
Yes.
form a pre-K through 12 school system.
Right.
Even with their choice, would they try?
No, it doesn't count Sheldon, Swanton, Highgate, and
Oh,
Franklin
right.
with MVU.
Right. Well, I just wanted to ask one question. How is that it does have to be a side-by-side, it can't be a side-by-side-by-side?
My assumption is that would require another alternative governance structure.
It's
Right.
not within their pre-laid out plan of preferred structures.
And their acting superintendent, I don't know who he spoke with.
Is that
But-
John Polchicki? Is that-
No, it's Michael Clark, who's there
Oh,
for
okay.
short term. They
From Fairfax?
Yeah.
previously,
One-time
yeah.
principal in Fairfax.
He said, to be realistic and frank, the State Board of Ed is not probably gonna look at any kind of structure outside of a merger. So even the idea of Alberg and Sheldon, I always wanna say Shelburne, I apologize. That they're certainly not gonna look at a structure that involves Alberg District, Sheldon District, Franklin District, it's just the status quo, and only Alberg joins us. They probably would only look at it favorably in some other construct. And so I don't know what that means. And I was pretty blunt and said, I really don't know what the rest of the Franklin Northwest Board would think about this. I don't know what the Act 46 group would think about it. I don't know what the other communities would think about this. We're only here to, and I don't even know if it's feasible given the fact that they seem to have had a vote, and not a non-binding vote, but part of this,
Goes back to the.
and we'll go back to, it's a vote when they want it to be a
It's all
vote.
binding.
So for what it's worth, it was an interesting conversation. It was good to hear other people that are struggling with these issues too, but, and Sheldon has a lot of thinking, but I think the larger board has a lot to discuss around that.
Jay wanted to add something.
Just one point to be mindful of. The Secretary's plan to relocate Sheldon to Franklin Northeast is not gonna happen, it's not gonna work, it's not gonna happen. Because the law says that they have to be mindful of making decisions about redistricting that would geographically isolate another school. So by their own admission and by the requirements of the law, that suggestion to put you into the Franklin Northeast is absolutely not gonna fit the criteria described in Act 46. They know that, and they're just throwing you into Enosburg district because they got no other place to put you. In order to follow through with the
Right.
pre-K through 12 designation of our unified unit schools, they don't have any other place to put you.
Jay, according to that report though, they made it seem like Sheldon wouldn't be, this is where I'm concerned, because they made it seem like Sheldon wouldn't be geographically isolated.
Well, they can make it seem that way, but the fact is that Sheldon is thinking, well, no, it's 25 miles from Montgomery and from Berkshire and Bakersfield. And with the new metrics for small school support grants, it's 15 miles door to door, with 5% of your students living no more than 5% living beyond 15 miles. So with their new updated metrics for geographic isolation, it doesn't work.
Is Alberg any closer?
Pardon me?
Is Alberg closer?
No.
But if
No,
Alberg and
it's-
Sheldon merged, it'd be part of Franklin Northwest. And so I don't
Right,
know
so that'd
if
be
being
with them.
next to Swanton would take care of that.
But I'm just saying that the argument that Sheldon has right
Right.
now to defend themselves is that the suggestion by the agency or the Secretary of Education is flawed. That's
It's
a really
concerning.
easy, case to make.
I mean, they
I'm
use the-
surprised they didn't send Sheldon to Fairfield, to Maple Run.
Yeah.
Because Sheldon and Fairfield are both pre-K 8s.
Probably the same distance.
Well, it's because Fairfield voted to give up choice.
Oh, they did?
Yes, when they chose to merge,
Oh,
so
okay.
you can't force Sheldon to give up choice.
And would it require the Maple Run members to?
To
Yeah,
accept
the
it.
communities would need to vote to accept, which would be fine, but it's the choice
Choice.
issue is at the heart of it right there.
Yeah.
Well, no, I don't know if we wanna go to the next piece, which is the fact.
Is Bob
that-
at a meeting?
What's that?
Does anybody know why Bob is late?
Yeah.
Yes, he wrote me an email that says that he is locked in a detention area at work.
They locked down something.
So he may not even be here
Right.
tonight
He
then.
said he would be late, but he was waiting for someone to get him out.
Well,
And that
maybe-
was at 6:30, so I think that,
maybe-
Because I think the critical part of this meeting, I mean, it's all been good, but next steps is a
that's
biggie.
really where
I'm
we're
gonna
at.
pick it up now,
And as the
because-
spokesperson, we need to make sure he's involved
Yeah.
as the chair, so I'm just kind of wondering what we do
You know,
next.
I would say this, though, as the chair of the Franklin Northwest Supervisory Union Board, I would say that,
Here's Bob.
There he is.
But we have to look at the big picture, too.
If you were a professor, we'd have all gone home.
We're just ready to call.
Outstanding.
We're glad you're here.
I'm glad I'm here too.
Did you
So-
survive your detention?
I did, as a matter of fact.
You must have really misbehaved.
You know, we gotta make some changes to the way our internal system works in the building, I think.
But let us clue you in on where we've gone so far.
Sure.
We've called the meeting to order, we've approved the minutes, we reviewed the state board meeting. We, the public also talked about some of their comments from the state board meeting, but they're really kind of waiting until we talk about next steps.
Okay.
We gave an Alberg update, which I don't know if you want to hear it, but
I would like to, since
we
I
could
was
just
not able
kinda-
to attend that meeting.
we can kind of go briefly because we
Yes.
discussed a little.
And I can go more in length later, but, and we met with Mike Shepherd. I'm not remembering the other board member's
Savage.
name.
Mike
Mike
said,
Savage. I did that. I must know someone. I know a Shepherd, but I must know a Mike Shepherd. I do apologize. I've done that all day today. So Mike Savage from the Alberg board, another board member. Terry was there, Julia was there, I was there, and then their acting superintendent, Michael Clark, was there. And they just talked about the fact that they're petitioning the Agency of Ed. They want out of their agreement to merge with the Island District.
Right.
They're unhappy with the supervisory union and the way that business is conducted and the struggles that they've had there. And they would really see themselves joining Franklin Northwest. And everyone acknowledged the only way to do that really would be through merging with Sheldon, that the Agency of Ed and the state board would not be, please interrupt me if I misspeak, that would not particularly be interested in, just another district joining Franklin Northwest, that it would be part of that. We listened, we talked about populations being very similar, so that likely any kind of board would be similarly represented. However, we did talk about the fact that our per pupil spending was very different between the two communities, that and that we would really need to think about the implications for the Act 46, our own argument and next steps, and whether the other community, Sheldon is definitely interested. Its goals, as Julia said, are to stay within Franklin Northwest and not have to go to the other supervisory union. So that was really the conversation. Nothing obviously was decided. We didn't have any quorum of any bodies there. They just wanted to meet face to face and have Sheldon and the board chair from Franklin Northwest hear that they are interested, and they are serious. I mean, they're quite serious about not being a member of, but we don't know really how likely getting out of that would be, Because of course, on that end, there'd be lots of dominoes. Could they exist any longer without Albert? Would be a question. So, not to mention the implications for us. So,
Thank you, that was a good recap. And before we go on to the next step, I would like to just say something that, just because I said, we're looking at all these pieces, and then when we talk about next step, it'd be really important for us to look at the whole piece too, because it's not just Act 46, it's also Franklin Northwest Supervisory Union. And the board there charged this committee with, number one, coming up with what can work, right? I mean, how do we want to fight this? But at the same time, on a parallel track, trying to figure out how we're going to do it if we have to. So I don't want to lose sight of how, because, the state, I know we keep saying they're not doing stuff, but they seem to be doing stuff, I mean, they seem to be, my personal opinion is that they shouldn't have even bothered with asking us to go through 2 years of looking at AGS, et cetera, et cetera. If they're not going to pay any attention to us, then. But anyway, we've done all that. But in the meantime, I think it would, the board voted that they wanted us to do 2 things. Number 1, fight the fight, and number 2, plan how we're going to deal with it if we have to.
Well, I think looking at what the charge was to develop the articles of agreement for a potential merger, which I think is outside the purview of this committee, because I believe that if a merger is imposed, we have to go through a 706 process and actually have a 706B study committee formed to develop those articles of agreement.
I think you're probably right.
Actually, I think they said they're going to give them to us.
Well, you have a choice. You can develop your own articles of agreement, or you can take the state default articles of agreement that they're supposed to be developing, which have not yet
They have not yet appeared, no.
So you have, I believe, 90 days from the date of the imposed merger to get a set of articles of agreement voted on in your communities that you have developed. And then if you're unable to get a set of articles passed, then the state will impose the default articles upon you.
Well, what do we do then about the charge that the board gave this committee? Didn't we accept it? I thought we accepted it.
Yeah, we did.
We accepted the charge, but we're unable to, we were under, and the board was under the opinion at the time that the committee would be able to develop those articles. However, I believe that has to be, I don't know the legal.
Should we get a legal opinion?
We should on that, because I believe it has to be a 706B committee that's officially formed and develops those articles and goes through the 706 process to get them voted on.
That 706 process was so big. It was the whole thing with it would take a year to go through
It
that.
has to be a 706.
Yeah, that was my understanding.
Well, we should make that should be.
Who appoints the
an action item.
706 committee? The SU board?
The SU board would commission that, and then it would have to be done by 706.
Right, which would be representational.
So then the Act 46 committee, our first line of business for next steps is to check into that and find out what has to happen.
I think we have to get a confirmation on that, and that would be helpful to have before Wednesday if we could, so that we would be able to report to the
Yeah,
SU
that would
board,
be
and therefore they would be able to take the next step they need to take if we can't complete that charge.
You've got a question?
And at that
Is
point,
it possible, Bob, for you to sit somewhere because we can't hear you actually?
Sure. I feel bad here sitting there giving
Yeah.
back to all of you as well.
It's like we're sitting there straight and we want to make sure we hear the right thing.
Sure.
Next to Julie would be all right, probably.
Sure.
Thanks.
Scoot over so you don't have to be so far away.
well, once 706 committee is formed, Act 46 committee is dissolved, right?
I would believe that our charge has been met with
Would no
the,
longer exist. And I'm
That would
not,
be good to know by Wednesday.
and I believe along that lines, the MVU would not have a representative. Because
Correct.
this is a community
It's by
based.
municipality.
And it's gonna be based on the populations of the community.
yeah.
I do know one thing that we did, and there was much more even, between the city and the town, which was how BFA was made up. So it was less of an issue, but we made sure that one of the reps from the city or the town was someone from the BFA board, so that we had, but it was very different makeup than what you have here.
Well,
So we'll see about getting a legal opinion about the Articles of Agreement. If it's 706 committee would need to be the one that does that. And the other question I would have is, can we get the draft articles ahead of time before, because are they gonna give them to you on November 1st? So that you don't really have an opportunity to see if you want to change them to present to the voters if that's a direction that the group wants to make, or just have them. I know that what they had said is you could have the default ones imposed upon you, and then communities could vote to change that. But that seems like a really cumbersome and ineffective process.
Yes.
However, the strategy, I will get a legal opinion on that. I think
That'd
that
be
you're completely right, Bob.
Is there gonna be any state money accompanying that 706 plan?
No,
I wouldn't think so.
just the deadlines.
Not at this time.
And the deadline is when?
Well, if you'll look at the incentives,
Right.
they all have a deadline, I think they're all July 1st, 2017.
Yeah.
They were for those first two rounds.
I don't mean the incentives, I mean the 120,000 to help you with the study.
The
All of
20,000.
them have a deadline, and we're past it.
So they're supposed to all be merged by July 1st, 2019. Okay.
Well, not being pessimistic, but I hope they follow through that, because they also told us when we were doing the $5,000 study that we were going to get a financial plan so we would know how it impacted if we merged. And we haven't seen it yet.
We completed that, what, 2
Pardon?
years ago?
I don't know if that was 2015 or 16.
Wow, okay. So that takes care of the Franklin Northwest situation, basically, in terms of waiting for that till we find that out. Okay.
Okay.
So then our next steps take the other way, right? I'm leaving this to you.
Well, and that's gonna have to be decisions amongst the communities and decisions amongst the SU board, I think, on the next steps. I think that's, again, outside of this committee's purview.
You know what would be nice, Bob? The way Sheldon's very clear what they want. It'd be nice if every town could state what they want, really clearly like that.
But I think we have, through the process, pretty clearly stated what we want.
So if I'm hearing Franklin doesn't care about being in the supervisory union as much as they care about having their own school.
Okay.
Is that, okay, so that's clear. And would you say Highgate is the same?
I think the Highgate board should speak to that.
Right now, the Highgate board is exploring the options both ways. I mean, whether we try to go independent or we try to play along with the merge, we're exploring our options. I mean, that's why we're here. We're trying to understand the unintended consequences of each decision.
The collateral damage too. Collateral damage.
Yeah.
And what would we say about Swanton, would you say?
Ho-hum.
Yeah, Swanton's a different beast.
I haven't worked hard at engaging people, but I've attempted to engage people. I mean, when we did the bond last March, January, February, engaged people, and they wanted to talk about it. Act 46, I'm not criticizing people, but there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of interest. And that doesn't mean people are against it.
Right.
It's just that it's not a big topic of discussion.
No, I agree.
I think part of that is because Swanton's the big one on the playground.
I don't think Swanton wants to lose its local school board,
No.
but I'm not sure people are making the connection between Act 46
Right.
and not having a local school board.
That is true, because people I talk to say, as long as we don't lose control. So, yeah.
Well, that's something then that we all share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think you all share it more. Like, I think it's stronger.
Well, yes, because you will still have control and we will.
Well, it depends.
Isn't the option there to either adopt the state's articles of agreement or come up with our own, which could result in equal representation?
Yeah.
I think that's really important. As an MVU board member, that would be one of the things, I won't say the only thing, but to make certain that we do the at-large vote or whatever so that everybody has an equal opportunity.
Yeah.
The same way as the MVU board now. I mean, I realize that it could the voters could do differently, but every town has 3 members on the MVU board.
And I can't.
And that's
imagine
because we
not
do
one.
the large voting, right?
Well, the MVU board will cease to exist.
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying, but I know that. But I think the concept under which the MVU board operates is a concept that I would like to see move forward.
I'm sure most of us would like to see that, but under the law, that won't happen.
But did the state board say that if you did a large vote, if all communities could vote on all board members, that's an opportunity for every town to put up candidates?
Well, we had our at-large voting, but at-large voting, as you well know, could seat every single member of the board in one single town, depending on which town has the majority of votes. If Swan has 3,992 registered voters, Highgate's got 2,100, and Franklin barely 900, so you can see where this is going.
But the same concept's been in place when I ran for the MVU board. There were other people in Swanton, after I announced, said, well, they thought about doing it. They could have voted, because they could have voted, and if the Swanton voters could have said, hey, we got 2 Swanton people, and not leave somebody out.
But there's nothing that you can hang your hat on legally that's going to ensure equal representation. You may have a gentleman's agreement, or some kind of article of agreement that might have existed back then to maintain equal representation, but under the current circumstances, there's no way you'll be able to maintain that. We don't stand up to the law.
You know, I can tell you this, that from what I've heard of the Swanton board, that the Swanton board believes that it should be collaborative the same way as it's
Yeah,
always been.
I do too. And how long has MVU been in existence? 48 years?
That doesn't, I don't care about that.
No, but for 48 years, the people in Swanton,
The gentleman's agreement.
Swanton, Highgate, and Franklin have kept 3, 3, and 3.
But you have to understand though, I wouldn't expect something would change coming from the members of the board. But it could come from one person from the community to file a petition. You know, we had that happen because we rejected a bid from Grand Avenue Enterprises to accept their low bid. That was quite a few years ago when I was still on the board. So there was an attempt to enforce proportional representation. Why that didn't happen, I don't know. Maybe the person that filed the petition gave up, but that's all it would take, would be just somebody from the community to file a petition for proportional representation, and you're done.
But it would take not just them to file, it would take everybody else to go along with it. Because it would take not just someone to file it, because you said that did happen, but it didn't happen because people didn't go along with it.
Well,
So it would take 2 things, it would take filing, it would take people breaking the gentleman's
Well,
agreement.
you would have a petition of 5% of the voters.
You know what, Jay, I can see where everything that happens, that anybody in Franklin Highgate would be worried about a slippery slope. Because every time that something's been said could happen, it hasn't, or the worst has happened or something. So I mean, I can see where credibility has been lost. So for me to say, oh, I'm sure it won't, I mean, I can see where people would say, nope, we gave up this and look what happened. We gave up this and now this.
And the other thing, Terry, to be fair, is the governor's already said that he'll have more initiatives to bring to the General Assembly in January. So what more is going to be thrown at us, we don't know yet.
That's right.
Probably not going to be favorable to us again.
For Franklin, it's a matter of risk assessment. I mean, put yourself in our shoes.
That's what I'm saying. I can understand it. I'm saying I can understand the risk assessment. There's more stuff coming out every time. It's like,
Yeah.
well, we gave this up and then this happened. I can understand it. It's too bad that that's kind of a situation, but it's understandable.
So, I'm sure that some of the people at this table were at the meeting today at the Abbey. Was there a discussion about that already? Did I miss
Jay
that?
filled us in on
What was your perspective?
Yeah.
I wasn't there.
how. Oh, you weren't there?
No, I was first day back at work after 2 weeks. There's no way I could get away.
We had a good meeting. There was what, 35 or so? Our legislators attended. As I explained earlier, I think I came away from that, first of all, very appreciative of David Zuckerman for coming in. But the most important thing that I came away from that meeting was that a lot of the legislators, including David, were under the impression that there was an off-ramp under the section 9 proposals, for those school districts that can show and demonstrate that they're meeting or exceeding the goals of Act 46. My personal opinion is that we've been meeting the goals of Act 46 long before the law became law. It's just that it's kind of comical when you think about it, because it's amusing when we hear other school districts across the state that say that, well, we can merge people, we can merge staff and things now. Well, we've been doing that for, I don't know, 8 years, at least with Sheldon. So it's kind of like the rest of the state's catching up with what we've been doing for years. You know, so as I said, the thing that I came away from that was is that a lot of the legislators that were there, including David, were under the assumption that when they voted in favor of Act 46, that there would be a method whereby schools that find themselves in our position would be able to remain as we are. If we could demonstrate the fact that we're meeting the goals of Act 46.
The alternative.
And where he goes from there with that will remain to be seen. But I think it's important to note that the lieutenant governor's race is a tight race right now. So it's a real crapshoot who's going to win. And I think David, being a Democrat, I mean, to his credit, he came and saw us, but it speaks loudly that we had a Democrat come here and spend the time with us. And he wasn't in any hurry to leave. Everybody got a chance to speak. There were no time limits imposed upon us, and
We didn't
I
have a
think he'd be
2-minute
okay with it.
window
But,
to
you know,
speak.
The question is gonna be, what's Tom Turner gonna do about
Yeah.
it? So he's next.
So
You
what
basically entertained all questions, Bob. No time.
Good.
So what are we allowed to do for next steps? I mean, what?
Our next step, immediate step, is to report back to the board on Wednesday. We'll have a legal opinion on the 706 requirements, if that needs to go forward. I think still advocating, writing letters and emails to the state board, urging our community members to take that opportunity to be heard is not a bad situation. And then we have to decide, and I think that's at the SU board level, what we do from there. Do we pursue, do we fight it? Do we pursue litigation? And I think that's most likely the next step, because if the state board isn't listening to any of the arguments or considering any change, and if the law doesn't go back to legislature for amendment, we don't have many options other than to fight a forced merger or accept a forced merger.
When you said that, did you say that would be at the Franklin Northwest board level or at the individual town levels?
Well, I think there's gonna be two different, it's gonna be like an onion. There's gonna be many layers to this, I think. I think each town is gonna have to decide what they wanna do. There's gonna be steps involved there, and there's gonna be steps involved at the SU level if we decide to pursue litigation.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you stated that I think towns have been very, very clear about what they want. Well, we are unified and support one another. We're headed down different paths.
Right.
And while we can all respect that, I think it's gonna get really, really tricky because our motives are gonna look different.
Mhm.
So I'm excited to hear how we can come together on Wednesday and come up with a plan of how we're gonna move forward, the plan A and the plan B. I think we talked about it months ago, having a contingency, and what that contingency is going to look like for each separate community, and school is gonna look very, very different. So we definitely need to figure that out.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting conversation.
Should be.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And we've got time on the agenda Wednesday, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So what are the next steps in terms of this committee? Well, I guess it depends on what happens Wednesday, huh?
Yeah, I think up to this point, just providing a good report of what happened to the SU board, and we'll have a better grasp on what needs to be done as far as the second charge of the developing the articles of agreement. What path needs to be taken for that to happen.
Can I make a suggestion for tonight? And that would be to ask the Act 46 committee members if they have any other input that they would like to see in the next steps. and then to open it up to the public to see if they have something they want us to
Yep,
know.
absolutely, I'm
the
open for
steps.
that.
That makes sense. Does that make sense?
Would you like to start us
I've
off?
already been talking. But you just
Same,
said something
yeah.
really well said.
Yeah, I mean, I think on Wednesday presenting sort of two avenue, or a couple different avenues, but definitely updating on the Albert meeting would be important, because that's a big factor. That's really new and has a lot of implications for all of the schools. I think we'll definitely need to spend some time as an SU board hashing that out and figuring out what that would mean.
And the legalities too,
Right.
because like you said, we had two avenues, but we don't know until we get the legalities,
Right.
what that looks like. That's good.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the Highgate Board is looking to find out what would happen if we sold the school's assets to the town, and look at what the unintended consequences are for that. And I think the Highgate Board is also looking to see what other towns are doing to see if that will work for Highgate.
Can I just ask a
Okay.
question?
Pardon me?
Would selling the assets, the school assets to the town be, would the intention be to become an independent school? Is that the reason you would do that?
Not necessarily. We're weighing out a lot. Our select board came to our meeting this week and they proposed the option that we sell our assets to the town, just so the town maintains control of the properties and the buildings, and then that we would lease the building to the district, the new unified district. But we have a lot of questions of the state funding, the, who maintains the buildings, there's so many variables that we're trying to find out about now.
Do you know of other schools who have taken that step in preparation for a forced merger?
There are two in Vermont that have done that.
North Bennington did it, Ludlow is doing it now, Stowe did it, Black River's doing it,
I think Holland did too.
yeah.
I'm pretty sure, because I
Well, the
was
thing
sitting by
is-
Mr. Castle with him,
Yeah,
and
curious
that's what he
as to
told
what
me.
You got till the 17th of October to take action, so you're running out of time.
What does that do? Do you mind if we spend a little
The
time?
law specifies that the school district the school district legally owns the assets. So the law specifies, Act 46 being the law, that the school district is required to sell those assets in the event that there's a merger. So they can't sell what they don't own. So if those assets are transferred to the ownership of the town, then they are protected from being absorbed by the new consolidated board. So you're protecting your assets, you're isolating them, and they're not available for sale.
So then would you be a state school, or would you be a private
Well,
school?
That would require another step. If you want to pursue an independent school, that would require a number of different processes that are described in 16 VSA 166.
So let me just ask you then, so if it's a public school, the town owns it, so there's no way that a board could close it, is that what that accomplishes?
Yeah, well,
That they're all still part of a supervisory union?
I'm
Not sure what it accomplishes.
It places a major roadblock in the closing of a school because, well, it places a roadblock, not a major one, but I should back up a bit. But what it does is it prevents the school from surrendering its assets. What it does is that action only protects your assets. It doesn't protect your students. Because the consolidated school district will still have the authority to tell you where your students are going to go to school. So you have to take other steps to protect your students. And that would be the steps to convert to an independent school.
So you would have to do this before October 17th, and it would require a vote from the town?
Well, no, you would have to take action that would put into place the intent by November 17th, which means that if you were to warrant a petition, you have 30 days, so you have to back up from October 17th to do it. Because the 17th is the drop dead deadline, set by the state, that's the date that they're going to announce the final statewide plan, so once they identify a statewide plan, that option is off the table. Now, what other school districts are doing, in particular Ludlow, is they are deferring the implementation date to 2020, 2021. So that gives you some breathing room for two reasons. If you set that, that protects your right to pursue an independent school. It gives you the ability to protect your students down the road. But it also gives you an opportunity to see what happens with Act 46 should there be some changes. I'm hoping from what happened today's meeting, that there may be some changes coming when they reconvene in January, because there's a lot of members of the legislature that are upset about the way the state board is handling this.
Yes. Okay, thank you for
I
that.
just have one more question, sorry. For those communities that have sold their school to the town,
I can't hear.
for the communities that have sold the school to the town, who maintains the building and?
Well, none of
That's
those,
what we're trying to find out.
none of those things would have to change, because the terms of the lease agreement can maintain the exact same things that are happening right now. So you can make those agreements as part of your terms of the lease. So absolutely everything that is being done to maintain your schools, to operate everything, can continue the same way as right now. It could be described in your lease agreements with the town. This is only intended to change ownership, so that it's not accessible by the law. That's 100% of the reason for it.
So we have the town owning the buildings, who's responsible for Highgate's kids? Because the town, okay, so the town select board is owning the buildings, that takes care of the board, bricks and mortar. Then what board takes care of the kids?
I'm sorry. I didn't-
Yeah.
The unified school district still
What?
have, the unified district has the care of your kid, of your
The
students.
district could still reallocate the assets or relocate the assets. In this case, it could be the children.
But could this be the stopgap, the first step, to hold off while we make more plans?
You'd have to take a vote to form an
So this is how I picture this. If a town sells their brick and mortar assets to the select board, okay, the select board controls that. Okay, now we have the kids. So if the final thing is that we merge, and so then Highgate will have members of the merged board that will make decisions about the education. Who's making the decisions about the building?
Okay, that's an easy question to answer. As
I
long
hope so.
as- It's unlikely that Highgate is going to experience any significant change to the use of their building. Because quite frankly, we have 350 students in that building right now. So it's unlikely,
About.
that there's going to be any changes that's going to threaten the future use of your building. So in this particular case, the issue of who controls the building will remain with the select board. It won't be sold for non-use or vacancy or anything, but the important thing is that the decision to what to do with the building remains a local decision rather than a consolidated school board decision. Okay, so where Franklin is concerned, it's a different proposition.
No, wait a minute. Okay, so the select board's taking care of the buildings, and the kids are represented by however many the articles of agreement say
333, whatever.
there will be for Highgate or at large, and they will take care of that. And then the merged board will negotiate with the select board of Highgate over leasing the buildings.
That's what I
They
hear.
don't wanna do that, they just say, the heck with it, and that's, we got enough room in the other buildings, we'll just send to the other buildings, cause we don't wanna deal with Highgate Board.
Well, I mean, we
Couldn't
can,
that happen? I'm just throwing it out there,
Right,
that's all.
could.
Couldn't that happen?
I can't predict what decisions that the new board will make. All that I'm saying here is the intent to do this, to sell the assets, is to isolate them so that you don't have to surrender them for $1. So what you're faced with is that if you merge, you gotta sell those assets to the control of the merged school board.
Mhm.
And it's up to them to decide how they use it, any way they want. and there's not anything you could say or do to change that. If you wanna keep local control about the use of your building and how it's gonna be used, then you have to avoid having to surrender it to the control of the new supervisory, or the new consolidated school board.
But I just want to ask a question, if it's all right. What about if one community does that and the other two don't, and there's a unified district, then those other communities would be their buildings would be the property of the new unified district, but whatever school went through this process would not be in that same boat. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, that's an easy one too,
Yeah.
because it's gonna only affect the assets owned by Franklin. Let's say Franklin decides to do this. The other entities, if they decide not to do it, then they will surrender those resources
To each other.
to each other, or to the new consolidated board. So, I mean, you can't, I mean, we can speculate this to our glue in the face, but it's not that complicated. You can make it as complicated as you want, but all that this is trying to do is to avoid having to transfer the assets to the consolidated school board's control. Everything else can stay the same. You can create all kinds of conditions in your terms of lease, maintain everything that you've got now.
So here's another what if. Go ahead, I'm sorry, Chris.
From a risk management standpoint, what worries me about a deal like that is, so now the consolidated board is negotiating with the Highgate Select Board over a building and a lease agreement. And that gives not many playing chips for either side, so at some point they could say, nope, not doing it, we're not gonna lease the building from Highgate tuition your students, and we're gonna spread them out between the other three schools, and now we have a building that's used.
And what about the kids? I keep going, what about the kids?
Well, that's exactly, I mean, that
Sorry.
building, you could end up with an empty building.
I think I'm-
We could get that anyway, because that's the thing, we could end up with an empty building that we don't own.
Or we could end up paying for the Highgate taxers, paying for any repairs in the building, plus helping to pay for the other buildings in the consolidated district.
Don, you had something, let me just.
I'm very patient.
Okay.
No, it's not you, no.
One thing that
People
comes
won't
to
come.
mind is, a couple of years ago, Andy King, he was on one of the boards there, and he was saying about Acts 46, we need to be on top of it real quick, or that we needed to vote for new pavement for the elementary school driveway. We need to get that in before Act 46. And I'm sitting there, well, what's the big deal? And he goes, he says, because once Act 46 is in, if Swanton or Franklin or Sheldon don't want to spend that money on our driveway, well, our driveway doesn't get done. And I'm kind of, oh, that is kind of a problem. But if we own the buildings, because at town meeting day, we vote whether we're gonna pave the driveway, we vote whether we're gonna put a roof on. So we could just do that, not in the school meeting, just do that in the town meeting, and then the money isn't going to the district. We're taking care of it ourselves, and we can get it paved if it needs paving. That's just a thought I had.
The problem, as they're pointing out, is not only are you as a town paying to pave your parking lot, if Swanton or Franklin or anyone that's part of the unified district, that the property is owned by the unified district, decides to pave their driveway, you're also paying a portion of that.
Right.
So you're gonna be paying for your own and paying for someone else's
Well,
versus
that's,
And they're
you
not
see, it's one of those
paying for yours.
unintended consequences that we need answers to.
You could negotiate that within your lease, though. You could say.
If
that,
they
you know,
want to lease
we-
from you, that's the
yeah,
point though.
Yeah.
What if they decide, we don't gonna lease from
Let's
you?
be realistic about that issue.
That's what I'm worried about,
If
you
they
know?
don't use the Highgate school, where are they gonna put 350 kids? The only school that's facing that risk is, the only school that's really facing that risk is Franklin, at 118 students. So, I mean, it's not likely that they're gonna be able to find a place to put 350 kids. Can you imagine 350 kids down in Swan Elementary School?
I-
Depends how many we lose. Now, our population, like yours in Highgate and Franklin, pretty stable. If anything, we're on the upswing, not the downswing.
Yeah.
Not if you ask the state board.
Between 350 plus kids and 118.
We don't have
They're an
350
easier number to
plus.
accommodate.
Yeah, no,
No,
not anymore.
we couldn't do that.
I think something,
I-
no, go ahead.
I understand what you're saying about that, but you know what? If push comes to shove and there's a consolidation, it will make it be very important about who gets elected that. And you know what? I'm an optimist. I'm sure the towns will choose people who are child-centered, who want to do what's best for our kids, because everybody loses if we aren't doing what's best for our kids.
Exactly.
Well, and if, in that consolidated district, the assets of the district are all of the schools. So it's
Right.
not just Franklin's asset
Right.
is Franklin's school. Franklin's asset is Franklin School, Swanton School, Highgate School. So if you think about it based in business, it behooves you to not put maintenance off in
Right.
any of those schools, because the more deferred maintenance you have, the more costly it's going to be. So even if they weren't child-centered, they were a bunch of businessmen. They're not, it doesn't make
Yeah, I
sense to
agree.
put that maintenance off,
I agree, Julia.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that is the shift that the state's talking about with these consolidated districts, that it's no longer individual schools, it's a group of schools, and so that group has to think as a group and not individually, similar to how we do it at the SU level. You know, we always are talking about our SU hats and our local hats, and so I think that's the big shift that would have to be made for any of us.
So-
I can't imagine anybody in our supervisory union wanting to close down Franklin. I mean, it's such a good school. Why would-
Right now, yeah.
I know you guys are worried.
But it's a
that-
taxes change, you know, I mean, you guys have lower taxes than the rest of the state.
Yes.
So their taxes may go up.
We don't really know what those new initiatives are gonna look like in January either, and this can evolve and change. And for us, it's too big a risk to take.
I mean, the bottom line is that there are 3,992 voters in Swanton. There's 2,100 in Highgate and just barely 900 in Franklin. It's just too risky for us to take a chance that nothing will ever happen.
So, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Chairman, whoever's running the meeting, you know, I think earlier we said the SU board makes some critical decisions. And I think that there are the two issues. We need to look at what we do. If people want to move a litigation, that's one option. But the other option is we really need to get our act together on configuring our articles. The other thing I'd like to say to Highgate, if I was a Highgate board, I would not waste my time, and I say waste, that's my term, on looking at selling your building or giving your building away or whatever. If you really want to do it, find out what Win Hall and I think it was North Bennington did. I was on the state board when it started, and I was vice chair of Senate Ed before I stopped. And I probably discussed that item 15, 20, 30 times. But if you really want to go that route, you become an independent school. That's the second step after you take and dissolve. You become an independent school. That gives everybody in your town elementary school choice. So if someone say, we don't want to come to there anymore because it's not a public school, you can hire your teachers, you can pay them the same amount of money, but you have to be an approved independent school, like St. J Academy and Sharon Academy, Thetford, and there are some elementary schools. But it's all there in the records of how North Bennington and Win Hall did it.
Approved or recognized?
You gotta be approved.
Well, the law says either approved or recognized.
I'm not here to debate it, but I'm gonna tell you that to pull it all off, I think, and take students in as tuition students, if somebody in Swanton wanted to go there, I think you're gonna need to be approved. But regardless, that is not an easy process to get through either, because it's very time consuming. But you could do it. You could become Highgate Academy of Higher Learning. and you would hire your teachers.
Home of the Grateful Dead?
Home of the Grateful Dead, that's right. Fish is on tour in Samantha, you know. But anyway, but seriously, if people feel that strongly in Highgate about this issue, then that's where you should be spending your time and money to have an independent elementary school. It can be done, but it takes a lot of time by volunteers and some money for an attorney, but it can be done. The steps are right there.
In any of the studies, have you taken into account the exodus of homeschoolers for financial loss? I mean, you know, because the homeschoolers they're leaving the schools.
I don't think you lose the financial on
Like
homeschoolers.
Highgate or Franklin have to close, got merged and is forced to close.
If they come into
That
the
does
school.
not mean all
Choose
those
students
students will
that
go
generate
with the Franklin Northwest Supervisory Union.
Right.
So you lose your body count, that's not exactly.
Student count, student count. We know what you meant.
You'll lose the count for federal funding, which is very important for the school thing. But I'm just saying, has that been looked into? Because homeschooling is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger.
So
If we
in
homeschool
Vermont.
students, we don't, if a family homeschools, we don't receive any count, and they're not part of our equalized pupil count.
Yeah.
We do get told, if a student comes for part of their day, we may get a
Yeah, you
portion,
do.
but not, it's pretty negligible. But
I'm just saying, has that been put into some of the research as if the school loses its, viability and it gets closed down, that does not mean all those students will go. And there is a possibility, I've heard people throwing out the ideas of private schools in this area. Actually, a new private school just opened in Fairfax.
Well, I guess that gets at the school choice. If you do an independent school, you have to have school choice. So there is that risk of all those students, may not choose to stay in the homeschool. Some may go to other communities or an independent school, and that may change the makeup of your budget and your tax rates. If you have kids going to different places.
So you don't get money for students, it's the way the students are pulled out that you get an equalized student
equalized pupil
count. So if you lost 10 students to homeschooling or whatever, it's not like they came with $18,000. It impacts your equalized pupil count, which impacts your tax rate.
Absolutely.
So it's not so direct as it used to be. I'm old enough to remember when you
we
got money.
also know what happens when you lose students.
Through dropout or impact.
Yeah.
Chris has.
Another question I have is if Highgate was to say go become an independent school, what happens to our state and federal funding aid for special ed and just any other, because of poverty rates and all that stuff?
Well, if you got geared up and providing all your special ed services, you'd be all right. But that wouldn't be cheap either.
That's correct.
And that's changing.
If you're an independent school, you're likely to lose Title I and some Title II money. You'll probably be able to keep Title II class size reduction money. However, when you build your budget, you're free as an independent school to contract with the existing supervisory union for services. So if you want to contract special education services, you can, and that will allow you to access IDEA money. So, and you'd have to look and review exactly how much money you're getting from your Title I programs, Title II, more likely Triple E. What you also have to bear in mind is that if you go to an independent school, then your assessments for your, in this case, pre-K through 6, so the central office would no longer be employed. So you'd basically be paying central office for the services that you contract for them, rather than paying your automatic assessment amount each year. So, some schools it's gonna turn out as a wash. What you lose is the federal funding, is gonna be a wash, which you don't have to pay.
So,
An independent school is a school that's governed by statute in the state of Vermont. You either have to be an approved school or a recognized school. The terms are spelled out in statute, how you achieve those, and if you achieve those, then you're entitled to state aid. But if you're a charter school, I don't believe that you're entitled to state aid.
There's no charter school laws in Vermont. Vermont is not a charter school law.
No, it's interesting because it's a gray area, because the state of Vermont approves tuition payments for private schools. So it's kind of an area that's a bit gray for private schools is concerned. Why I bring that up is because Montgomery pays for a private school that's not even in this country.
Go back one.
State college,
Yeah.
which is a bone of contention, but nobody seems to want to deal with that. And I think the reason for that is because you have these interstate compacts.
Yep.
And so they don't want to do anything that would jeopardize those. And by an interstate compact, it's like those schools that have formed alliances with, on the say, New Hampshire and Vermont border.
Garrett, you had,
Well, I just wanted, to say, I mean, it's particular to, because Lynn was talking about, have we studied this and we studied that? We haven't studied the impact of losing kids to homeschoolers and independent schools, because nobody at the Franklin Northwest and nobody at the Act 46 meetings are talking about closing down any schools. So, I mean, I know that the possibility exists, but at this time, that is not what, has not been a conversation. So why would anybody study that when that's not what the conversation's been about? It's not about closing schools.
I'm just wondering, because that's the conversation outside of this.
I understand,
In
but
the
it's
state,
not
the
been in this.
conversation is that Act 46 has closed down schools.
And if we get mandatory student-teacher ratios in January. they're-
Right, I'm not saying it's.
Oh, yeah,
but I'm
everybody's
just
worried
saying that
about
it has
those
not been a
things.
conversation
Absolutely.
Right, so
here.
that's
So
why-
I just want her to know that, that's all.
Yeah, that's why, I was just curious whether that had, if
No.
anybody had looked into that.
Correct, your point is well taken, but it's again going back to the risk assessment.
Yeah,
We can't guarantee that that might continue for the indefinite future.
right, I understand. I just wanted to point out
Yes,
why we haven't
yes.
studied that,
Yeah,
because.
that may, because you haven't got,
wasn't part of the conversation.
Yeah.
yeah. Whereas I'm
So-
looking at, what, isn't Elmore closed,
Right.
schools have been closed. So I'm looking kind of beyond what
But the Elmore voters voted to close that school.
Well,
the
government's made no secret
taxpayers,
that he
not
wants
parents.
schools with less than 150 students closed.
What is that?
Governor Scott,
I thought it was 100 students.
150.
150.
Was 100?
That's what he said.
Yeah, that's,
Why do you say that? That's just.
Does the other one get reelected?
Any word on the reschedule of that meeting? Is there any word on the reschedule of that meeting
Reschedule what meeting?
with Governor Scott?
Phil
Oh,
Scott.
the governor?
Yeah.
Oh, no, there's no word.
He's not showing.
Actually, I'm gonna get a little mileage on that, because for him being a Republican governor, refusing 3 months of request to meet with him, and even his staff, we were told today, weren't aware that he canceled the meeting at the last minute. And so here we have a Democrat, a Republican governor, who takes the time out of his busy schedule to come up and spend 3 hours with us. That was good for our veterans.
All right, so we have, I think we've covered next steps pretty thoroughly. I think this is pretty much fallen under the other category. Is there anything else that anyone has to questions or comments or insight on this at this point before we go to the SU with our report?
Still haven't heard back here yet.
I'm sorry, I just was wondering if we're kind of moving along here on the agenda. I don't want to keep folks here all night, but do we have anything else, questions or comments or input before we go to the SU board on Wednesday with our report?
I I'm just wondering, is there anything else that, you know, not that I'm volunteering our office, but that we should get some type of a legal opinion about before Wednesday night? I mean, there's been lots and lots of questions here tonight, but
Yeah.
it sounds to me like they may come up again on Wednesday night, and are there other questions that maybe we should do some research
That's a really
about so that
good
we're
question.
prepared for Wednesday night? I mean, we've got a couple things, I guess.
Yes, we
that-
definitely have a few things that we're looking into, but
Yeah, like what happens if the town owns the buildings?
No, that's what I'm wondering, should we research
Yeah.
that, or we feel like we need direction to do those kinds of things, and so should we research those things?
I would encourage Terry or Julie or somebody to talk with Margaret McLean and see if she feels as an attorney in the state who is most knowledgeable about all these issues. I mean, I've worked with a lot of law firms, but I'm not sure they have anybody that, you know, they're doing a lot of law, but are they doing law specifically right to see?
But wouldn't our attorney, wouldn't our
school
supervisory union
Pietro Lynn,
attorney?
is that who it is?
yes, Lynn and Blankman. I mean, I think that they certainly have the pulse on a lot of this, but that doesn't mean that they,
David Kelly?
If they don't know, they should ask somebody who
Yes.
does.
See, I know that when I wanted a special ed attorney, I went there because I knew they had somebody who was dedicated to special ed. I don't know if there's anybody in the state that really has somebody who's worked on a lot of Act 46 stuff.
That's probably
That's what I would like to find out. Margaret would know if anybody would. And then if not, then go back to our attorney. But if it is, then I would encourage people to have the attorney attend that meeting. And put that as your first item on your agenda. And have the attorney right there, so you don't have to say, well, we'll call our attorney and we'll get an opinion, we'll schedule another meeting. Have them right there. Might cost you $1,000, but it might be money well spent, have them at the table.
So, a suggestion would be David Kelly from Greensboro.
Okay?
That's who works.
I'm not sure, I'm not offering that as a suggestion. David Kelly has been working more with a group who's opposed to Act
Right.
46. I don't think, I'm not sure, you can check on that, he'll speak for himself, but he's been volunteering his time for that, he's also trying to set up his own.
That might
I'm
be
not
good.
sure he's gonna volunteer his time to come up here and,
Well, I don't think I wouldn't ask anybody to volunteer their time to come here. But I think for a few $1,000s it'd be well spent.
you can contact him, he'll speak for himself.
Oh,
You mentioned Margaret McLean, I couldn't hear anything else you were saying, Mr. Collins, but I know that Margaret and Dave have,
Yeah, I just said, what we were talking about was, the district uses an attorney. I've never been in that business for a long while, I've used them some, but I tried to pick attorneys who I knew had experience in specific things. And I just said Margaret would be able to say, this person knows kind of the ins and outs of Act 46 and how it might be. My recommendation was that they consider paying that person to come to that meeting and put that first on the agenda. I'm not gonna be there, and it doesn't make any difference to me, but I just think that time is of the essence. And to go to a meeting and then try to get a legal opinion and get back in another meeting,
Yeah.
I don't think you have that kind of time.
If you're looking for an attorney, I can make a recommendation.
I'm not, but somebody might.
Actually, I'm gonna defer to the supervisory union to do that. I'm not.
I'm sorry, Jay, I couldn't hear
I
you.
would recommend Terrence Gillis and Rickerson out of Montpelier. They are specialists in municipal law, in particular Paul Gillis, I'm sure you remember.
I know Paul Gillis very well.
Yep, and Paul being a former deputy secretary of state for 12 years in the Douglas administration, he knows municipal law like he knows the documents. So if you're looking for an expert in this field, I would highly recommend that.
And Pietro's office might tell you.
Yes. Well, I know Pietro is out of town right now, so I would be calling his office anyway to see who is available, because the Franklin Northwest Board meeting is the day after tomorrow, so I think it's a good idea to see if we can get some advice at the meeting, but I think time is definitely
Not in your favor.
not in our favor on that one.
That's a good way of putting it.
But, so that may mean that your SU meeting, you may need to, reschedule and get it if you're gonna do it. I just found as a superintendent, it was really difficult when we had a meeting and legal issues came up and we'd say, well, we'll go and talk with Down Franklin Martin, we'll get back to you. Then we get back to you and the answers created another whole set of questions.
Exactly, I like to have, if it's
I want them right
complicated.
there, it may cost money, but I want them right there.
may have to just do a special meeting or something. to
What our options
meet
are.
Wednesday
Yeah.
night.
Yeah,
That makes sense too?
that makes sense. All right, anything else anyone has or any questions?
We're glad you could make it.
I'm glad I could make it.
Yes,
I
we
was
thought
getting a
we missed
little
you.
worried.
That was a tough first day back, huh?
It was, it's a typical Monday and a first day back after 2 weeks. It was great.
You look pretty relaxed.
I'm still in vacation mode a little bit.
If there's no other comment from anyone, I would move we adjourn and ask the SU committee to determine what our future is.
Take a second on
I'll
that.
second it.
All in favor?
Our future, Act 46 committee's future.
Yes.
I did take it to mean that.
So did I.
Not future, you know.
All right, so we are adjourned at
Determine our future.
8:39.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for.